Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The hallway at Willow Creek High School was noisy that morning, filled with students' laughter and the clatter of shoes on the tile floor. But for 16-year-old Jasmine Carter, every step felt like imminent danger. Since the beginning of the year, she had learned to recognize the signs. Marcus Holt, the school bully, was always lurking somewhere, ready to prey on anyone who seemed different or weak. That day, she was carrying a heavy bag of books, unaware that her peaceful hours had just ended. Marcus, who had spotted her, crept up behind her. With a brutal movement, he snatched her bag and hurled it against the wall. The books and notebooks crashed to the floor with a metallic clatter. Jasmine bent down to gather her belongings, while the students around her held their breath, some laughing, others horrified. "Do you really think you can walk around here like you're somebody?" Marcus said, a cruel smile on his lips. Jasmine felt her heart pounding wildly. Fear and anger mingled within her, but instead of responding with violence, she made a bold move. She took out her phone and sent a message to her father. "Dad. Marcus is hurting me. Come quickly." She knew her father was no ordinary man. David Carter, an army general, was feared for his discipline and brutality in battle. Those who had faced him spoke of a man who commanded respect simply by being there, a strategist capable of turning the tide of war and breaking even the most formidable armies. For Jasmine, he was also a protective and unwavering father figure. Just a few minutes later, a low rumble echoed through the corridor. The students froze. The school door burst open and a massive man entered. His piercing eyes scanned the scene, settling on Marcus, and an icy silence fell. It was David Carter. Jasmine felt her shoulders relax slightly. The tyrant, on the other hand, felt the ground give way beneath his feet. For the first time, Marcus understood that he had underestimated not only Jasmine, but the force that protected her. The atmosphere was thick with tension. A single glance from the general was enough to make anyone who dared defy his daughter tremble. This prologue sets the scene for an imminent confrontation and announces that this story will not only be about a young girl facing intimidation, but also about authority, family justice, and revenge against cruelty. The sound of heels clicking on the tiles echoed in the main hallway of Willow Creek High. Jasmine Carter walked briskly, her heavy bag of books clutched to her chest, her mind focused on her studies. She had always been a studious and discreet student, preferring to avoid conflict. But that morning, the tension was palpable, like a shadow following her. Marcus Holt, the school bully, was already there, perched near the lockers like a predator watching its prey. The students around him instinctively moved away, all aware of the arrogant and brutal boy's reputation. Marcus had a particular knack for humiliating those who seemed vulnerable, and Jasmine, with her difference and quiet demeanor, represented exactly what he hated. Well, he sneered as he saw her approaching. "Little Carter thinks she can walk right past me without me noticing?" Before she could react, Marcus snatched her bag and hurled it violently against the wall. Notebooks and books scattered across the floor. The students around her held their breath, some laughed nervously, others looked away, uncomfortable. Jasmine bent down to gather her belongings, her heart pounding in her chest. "Do you really think you're somebody here?" Marcus said, a cruel smile on his lips. Jasmine felt a mixture of fear and anger rising within her. She knew a direct confrontation with Marcus would be risky, but she wasn't ready to be crushed. With a trembling hand, she pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. "Dad. Marcus is hurting me. Come quickly." A few minutes later, a deep rumble echoed through the corridor. All the students froze. The school's main door burst open and a massive man entered. His heavy, measured steps made the floorboards vibrate. It was David Carter, a respected and feared general throughout the country, but above all, Jasmine's father. His piercing gaze swept the corridor, settling on Marcus. The tyrant immediately felt the ground give way beneath his feet. The silence became almost palpable, no one dared to breathe. David Carter's mere presence transformed the corridor into a psychological battlefield. Marcus Holt, the general said in an icy, low but menacing voice. You think you can intimidate my daughter and get away with it? Marcus's face paled. Never in his short life had he felt such fear. The laughter and whispers of the students had vanished, replaced by a heavy, respectful silence. Jasmine, standing motionless behind her father, felt an intense sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, she felt protected and safe. General Carter didn't smile, he didn't need to raise his hand. The sheer authority of his gaze was enough to pin Marcus to the spot. The air crackled with tension and electricity, an imminent confrontation was inevitable. The tyrant, accustomed to imposing his rule through fear, was about to discover that some forces could not be defied. The hallway at Willow Creek High suddenly seemed to shrink. Every eye turned to David Carter, Jasmine's father, whose imposing stature loomed over everyone around him. Marcus Holt, who just minutes before had thought himself invincible, felt the ground give way beneath his feet. For the first time, he was facing someone he couldn't intimidate. David Carter advanced slowly, his boots striking the ground with measured rhythm, like a silent threat. His piercing steel-blue eyes never left Marcus. Every student in the corridor could feel the weight of his authority. Do you think this is the playground to terrorize my daughter? Asked the general, his voice resonating with an icy force that made Marcus shudder. The tyrant, unable to reply, stammered a few incoherent words. He felt his confidence crumble under the general's gaze. David Carter made no violent gesture, he knew that psychological intimidation would suffice. You have a choice, Marcus. You can either learn respect now, or suffer the humiliation of your entire school life, continued the general, calmly but with unquestionable authority. The professors arrived in the corridor, noticing the palpable tension. Even they remained silent, aware that Marcus Holt was trapped not by physical force, but by the aura of the man they nicknamed the most feared general. Jasmine, trembling but relieved, looked at her father. To her, he embodied absolute justice. She had never seen Marcus so powerless, and a feeling of quiet, sweet victory rose within her. David Carter leaned slightly towards his son and whispered. It's time you understood that every action has consequences. Then, turning to Marcus. You're going to apologize. In front of the whole class. And you're going to think about what it means to bully someone. You underestimated my daughter, and you're going to regret it. Marcus, his voice trembling, murmured a weak sorry. The humiliation was complete. Around them, the students exchanged surprised and admiring glances. For the first time, Marcus Holt was no longer the master of the corridor, he was silenced by his mere presence, an authority that commanded respect instantly. Jasmine felt a wave of gratitude and pride. Her father had not only protected her, he had restored order, reminding everyone that some bonds, like that between a father and his daughter, were invincible. The next morning, Willow Creek High was eerily silent in the main hallway. The students, still reeling from the previous day's events, murmured in hushed tones. Jasmine Carter, walking with pride, felt the respectful and curious glances directed her way. She had never imagined her life could change so quickly. Marcus Holt, meanwhile, moved through the corridor like a ghost. The laughter and jeers that usually accompanied his steps were gone. Every student he passed averted their gaze or whispered in hushed tones. For the first time, he felt the isolation and shame his victims had endured for months. In the teacher's lounge, Principal Thompson summoned Marcus for a discussion. Jasmine's parents had insisted that the school implement a proper lesson. David Carter, despite his imposing stature and reputation, wanted Marcus to understand that brute force wasn't always the answer. Marcus, you need to understand that bullying has consequences, the principal declared. The apology you offered yesterday wasn't enough. You'll be assigned community service hours, and every incident will be closely monitored. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. For the first time, he felt the true weight of his actions. It wasn't just the humiliation in front of the students, but the awareness that every cruel gesture left a lasting mark. Meanwhile, Jasmine, sitting in her classroom, felt a mixture of relief and pride. Her father wasn't just a formidable general with a terrifying reputation, he was her protector. She realized that the fear she had felt around Marcus had been replaced by a newfound inner strength, the kind that comes from the security and support of a loving and strong parent. During the break, some students secretly came to congratulate Jasmine, whispering words of support. She smiled shyly, understanding that strength of character lay not only in the ability to fight back, but also in the courage to ask for help and to believe that justice could prevail. For his part, Marcus Holt reflected on his behavior. The arrogance that had defined him for years was beginning to crumble. The weight of shame and the piercing gaze of General Carter in his mind reminded him that some people could not be defied with impunity. The hallway at Willow Creek High was no longer the same. Fear and cruelty had lost their power, replaced by respect and the awareness that every action has consequences. Jasmine felt that, for the first time, she could walk freely, proud and serene. A few days after the incident in the hallway, the entire school still seemed to be whispering about what had happened. Marcus Holt still wandered around like a confused teenager, feeling everyone's stares, unable to recapture his usual arrogance. But David Carter knew that simple humiliation wasn't enough. For Marcus to truly understand, he needed to leave a lasting mark on his mind. One morning, as Marcus stood near the lockers, the familiar rumble of boots on the tiles announced the general's arrival. Every student froze, recognizing the imposing figure. Marcus tried to stand straight, but his hands were trembling slightly. "Marcus Holt," began David Carter, in a cold and authoritative voice, "do you think your behavior goes unnoticed?" The tyrant attempted an apology, but the general raised a hand. Silence fell. Words were unnecessary, every movement of Carter, every breath, imposed discipline. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget," he continued. "Not through physical force, but through the weight of responsibility and truth." The general led Marcus to the middle of the corridor, and the students were asked to sit on the steps. Carter began to explain, calmly but with chilling intensity, what it meant to intimidate someone. He spoke of respect, courage, and the inevitable consequences of cruelty. Every word resonated like a thunderclap in Marcus's mind. "You didn't just hurt my daughter, Marcus. You showed everyone what injustice means," he concluded. "Today, you're going to make amends. In front of all your classmates, you're going to acknowledge your mistakes, sincerely apologize, and promise to change." The entire class watched, captivated. Marcus, humiliated but aware that any resistance would be futile, murmured a weak "I'm sorry." But the general didn't stop there. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Every cruel word, every violent gesture, leaves a mark. Your reputation is now proof of what you have become, someone who must learn humility above all else." The students applauded Jasmine softly, who this time felt neither fear nor anxiety. She knew that her father had not only protected her safety, but had transformed a frightening situation into a life lesson for the entire school. Marcus, his face flushed and shoulders slumped, realized that fear alone was not enough to control someone like David Carter. Respect, justice, and moral strength had triumphed over cruelty. For Jasmine, that day marked a turning point. She understood that even in the face of the most formidable tyrants, family, courage, and integrity could change the course of events. And for Marcus Holt, it was the beginning of a lesson he would never forget. In the days that followed, Willow Creek High seemed transformed. The hallways, once the scene of mocking laughter and threats, now exuded respect and caution. Jasmine Carter walked with confidence, her bag firmly in hand, aware that yesterday's fear had been replaced by a new strength. Marcus Holt, for his part, was no longer the arrogant tyrant. The public humiliation orchestrated by General Carter, combined with the duties and punishments imposed by the school, had shaken his confidence. Every student he encountered silently reminded him of his mistakes, and he began to understand the value of respect and humility. During the break, Jasmine was approached by several classmates who had previously observed her in silence. "We're sorry about what happened. Marcus was horrible," one of them whispered. Jasmine smiled gently. "It's no longer important. Now everyone knows that fear is worthless against courage and justice." At home, David Carter looked at her, smiling, satisfied. "You were brave, Jasmine. And you learned something important. True courage isn't about fighting someone, but about knowing when to ask for help and standing firm in the face of injustice. Jasmine nodded. She knew her life at school would never be the same again, but this transformation wasn't just for her. She had given all the students an example of what it meant to stand up for oneself with dignity and confidence. As for Marcus, he spent the following weeks reflecting on his actions. He understood that arrogance and cruelty lead only to isolation and shame. General Carter had not only protected his daughter but had also taught Marcus a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life. True power lies not in intimidation, but in respect, discipline, and integrity. And so, Willow Creek High regained its calm. Jasmine could walk the halls without fear, surrounded by classmates who respected and admired her. And Marcus Holt, once a bully, slowly but surely began to change, understanding that some men and some families are invincible when they stand together. The lesson had been clear: in the face of cruelty, courage and justice always triumph.